All right, hello, I am Jenny Nowak with Plus One Solutions Remote ABA Supervision, and you must be watching this video because you are one of our current trainees. So this training video is going to talk about how we do our observations each month. Now, for 99% of my practice, those observations are recorded. Um, so that what that means then is when I watch them, you're not necessarily present. So there has to be some documentation of what you think I'm looking at so that I can give you the best feedback possible. Let's think if maybe we worked in the same center or the same school building, and I could pop in and say, "Hey, what's up? Oh, you're going to go see this teacher, or what for? Oh, yeah, you're going to tell her about that? Awesome. Well, how do you think she's going to respond? Oh, and what if she doesn't? Man, okay, yeah. Hey, what time are you going to do that? Fine, I'll be there." And that would be great. I'd be there in person. I could ask you the questions. I could give you some real-time feedback, all of the really fun things. But because we are remote and I don't get to pop in and see you with your client during your monthly observations, I have you record them, Zoom, your phone, FaceTime, however that works for you, and then link them into a video observation document where we track all of the necessary pieces. I think by now you've gotten the pattern that the board has certain requirements for everything that we do. Now, the requirements for the observation are not as detailed in the handbook. But one thing that I do want to say is that when I watch your recording, it counts as one of our supervision meetings, if you will. It counts as supervised time. And so all of the requirements for our regular meetings, our face-to-face live meetings, still apply to our recorded client observation meetings. So some of the documentation on this form is to address those requirements of the board to meet those meeting um, documentation, I don't know, rules, guidelines. So let's take a look over here. This is in your web portal under your video observation. It's also linked in your agenda. And one of the things that you'll notice is this top row, number one, right here, has all that same information that your hours tracker has and that your Prove It has. So your name, my name, your work site, type of supervision. Because anytime we have a meeting, the board says that's what we're supposed to document. Okay. Also, we're going to have the date that you did this, your observation. I'm going to put the date of our meeting, the date that I actually reviewed. So you'll see reviewed by Jenny on November 20th, and my time in and time out will always be in here. It's up to you, the trainee, to make sure that this information gets over to your agenda, which 99.9% of the time I will do for you, but then that you take it from your agenda and make sure it gets into your hours tracker so that whether we're tracking towards 4 hours of time with the supervisor or 5 or 6.5 or even something more if we're doing concentrated time, that we don't miss out or lose this time from your observation. Okay, so let's see what some of these other columns are. The first one is the date and time. The second one is identifying information on your observation. So give it a title and then link everything important. So here's the video. If you happen to have a PowerPoint or a Q&A page or a scenario page or I don't know, some type of handout for a parent, any of those things that you're going to have in your training, I need to have access to over here. Now, if you're using Google Docs and you're linking them in, make sure that I have access so that I can open them um, when I click on them. Okay, if you're not sure how to do that, check with your supervisor during your session, and we will make sure that you know how to masterfully use Google Docs and all things just Google to be able to add in all of the supporting documents for this. Now, the next column is very optional. It's a time stamp, right? Have you been watching something and somebody says, oh, well, fast forward to 32 minutes and 12 seconds, and that's when your little ballerina does her part of the show. So you can skip all of that front stuff. So if you're doing an observation, and maybe your observation takes an hour and a half, but there are specific pieces of it that you want your supervisor to look at, that's where you might put in these timestamps. Okay. The next column is your client. So it can be co-teacher. I always prefer that you put initials in here so that if you happen to be working with the same teacher or you happen to be working with the same parent, that we have that person who is acting as your client on your records, right? That's one of the things that the board says we must have when we record that we did an activity. Date, time in, time out, who we're working with, all of those things. Okay, so then this next column is so that I can give you, or your supervisor can give you, the best feedback possible. And so this is where you tell us for each section, each little chunk of your recording that we're going to be observing, what do you think you're doing there? And what do you think I should be looking at and giving you feedback on? Okay, so it says goal, but it's not a goal like an IEP goal. It's not that Susie will train the 7 dimensions to 3 teachers at school. That's nice. Okay, but that's not what each little specific part and piece of the training is intended to be for. So these are small specific items, maybe per slide or per activity or per topic change. So this observation in particular was on the 7 dimensions. And this trainee was training a co-teacher who knows that my trainee is back in university and going for the ABA certification and is interested in why this trainee is going back to school and what she's learning. And so the trainee was going to share information on the 7 dimensions. So these were her goals for the different parts of her training. She's going to give an introduction. She's going to tell the teacher the objectives for why we're here. She's going to list the 7 dimensions. She's going to define and give examples of the 7 dimensions. She's going to play a little expert witness, I guess, video. Then she did some review, some questions for engagement and knowledge checks. And then she had a handout that was a visual for a quick review and for the co-teacher to take home. Wonderful, right? That tells me what I'm looking for. And I can say, did she list all 7 dimensions? Were the definitions and examples correct? Was the video relevant and helpful? On the review, did the teacher understand? If the teacher didn't understand, did the trainee provide follow-up to that? And was the handout A, correct, and B, useful to the training and presentation? So these are really nice little goals, the purpose of what this trainee was doing for each section. Okay. Then we also want to try and relate everything that we do to the test content outline. That's what I'm supposed to be watching you do. Do some good ABA, implementing part of our test content outline skills that are those minimum necessary skills that you need to be a brand new board certified behavior analyst. So if you look in the test content outline, I'm going to believe these are right, but A5 talks about knowing the dimensions, probably principles of ABA. And so that's what she's presenting here. And then because I'm always trying to help you function as the consultant, not just a trainer or even behavior analyst, I want you to think about what unrestricted task are you doing, right? What category of activity from your hours tracker are you doing at any given time? And so for this individual, some of this was talking and training, right? Listing, defining, she's just training. But then when she gets down here to the review, the knowledge checks, the ASR, active student responses, she swaps over into assessment. Now, possibly this handout visual for quick review, that could be program design, right? How am I going to help this teacher who I'm going to give the information to take this information with her back into her classroom and use it on a regular basis? So that could be program design. And then if you look at somewhere on your agenda, I believe, the how to do a good ABA training, one of the steps that it talks about are making sure that we have engagement and that we have knowledge checks. That's one of the reasons why you go to university, and that's one part of your program, and a totally separate part or clinical part of your program is the supervised time. And for most people, supervised time, things like listening to a lecture, right? So if you're in university at the same time and you're just listening to a recording of a lecture of somebody teaching, the board's going to say that's not going to count because there's no engagement, there's no feedback, there's no knowledge checks happening there. So in our trainings, instead of just blah, 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 and talking for 7 minutes about the 7 dimensions, are you providing opportunities, A, for engagement, making sure they're still with you, keeping their attention on you, on your information, as well as knowledge checks to make sure they're getting what you're trying to present to them. So this column asks for how did you do your engagement and how did you do your knowledge checks. So for this trainee, there were explicit examples and some discussion with the teacher. And then there were kind of quiz questions down here on her review and her ASRs. And then this last question, again, we think of most often when we're doing direct implementation, differential reinforcement, right? Pay the thing that you want more, right? So an independent response gets a bigger reinforcement and a prompted response gets a smaller reinforcement. We should use our ABA principles and strategies with the adults that we work with just as much as we do with the learners, the younger children, students that we work with. So to that end, I want you to be mindful of this person over here, this co-teacher that they are training and making sure that when they ask these questions and they look for engagement and they look for knowledge, that they're giving good feedback. Independent, correct answers get a better, yeah, wow, that's right. You were really listening. You got that. Versus a prompted answer that says, oh, well, do you think it's A or B? Yeah, B because of this. Yeah, nice, you got it. So they still get a you got it with some prompting and error correction, but they don't get the same type of woohoo and yay during this type of a training as the independent answer would. Now, by the same token, if you're not training an adult and you're working on little Bobby and teaching him a manding program, and you're recording that for me, your goals are going to be different, and your differential reinforcement is going to be based off of Bobby responding and manding correctly for that item that he desires. So all of these columns apply whether you are doing restricted hours or unrestricted hours, whether you're doing something that looks more like an intervention task or even an assessment versus a training, right? Let me convey information to you. And then because we talk so much about feedback, I want you to give yourself some feedback. So this orange column is massively important. This is where you get to say, man, that was the hardest thing I ever did. Or I prepared for this for hours and thought it was going to be great. And when I actually did it with my client, it bombed. Or this was my practice run. I was just trying to do it to make sure I could do it really well. But the teacher that I did it with said it was amazing. And so I'm turning this in as my actual observation. It went better than I thought. So giving me some type of feedback on how you think you did, so I can agree or disagree, And then any questions that you have for me. How could I do it better? The teacher, parent, technician didn't seem to get my point number 3. How could I have said that differently? My third scenario was just really rough, and where they got the first 2 really well, the third one crashed. How could I have presented that scenario better? So this is a place for you to ask me specific questions that you want some feedback on. And then this last comment, once you have filled out all of the rest of this, I'm going to come in and watch your recording and respond to what you said was here. So I'm going to make my comments match what you think your goals are. I'm going to make my comments match what you asked for feedback on or gave yourself feedback on. Okay, so this is how this form works. And then when all of those comments are done for 1 month, we put these color-coded bars because otherwise you'll come in and try and put the next month's observation up here and it's in the middle of my comments. So there really is a plan and a purpose to how the form works. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this will give you a clearer idea on all the information that needs to go into your observation form before your supervisor takes a look at it. Now remember, it is preferred that your observation is done by the 15th of the month, maybe the 20th of the month at the latest, especially if there's a Thanksgiving break, a Christmas break, a January break, a spring break. If there are breaks and people are going to be off work or perhaps having family time or travels, make sure on your agenda when you set dates and schedules with your supervisor that you plan early in the month to get your observation completed. That way, if there's a reschedule, something needs to happen, you have enough time to still get that observation to your supervisor for review by the end of the month. Because remember, getting an observation done is one of those non-negotiables. If you don't get an observation for the month, you don't count anything. Okay, so make sure that you stay really on top of your observations. How much? Shoot for an hour's worth of time every month. That might be 2, 3, or even 4 separate observations. Again, if I were in your building, I'd be popping by and watching what you're doing all the time. So give me opportunity, give your supervisor opportunity to see more rather than less of your implementing of ABA skills. And also remember, we want to see the things that you thought were really difficult or even horrible, because then we can give you feedback on how to help make that better as well. So don't just practice for hours and hours and hours and give us the best training of a parent on how to implement a program that you've ever done. Let us see the difficult ones also. All right, make sure that you've written down your start and stop time for this training and record that on your hours tracker, or at least on a piece of paper so that your supervisor can help you enter that onto your hours tracker. And then look for the quiz to make sure that you can answer the questions and attest to having watched this training. And of course, let me know or your supervisor if you have any questions about how to record your information on your observation form. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.